The story opens in 1817, on a pitch-black night in a small Massachusetts town. A young boy is jolted from his sleep by a commotion and discovers his bearded father digging a hole in the yard. When the father notices the boy watching, he drops his tools and heads back toward the house.
Open the door!
The boy's terrified mother tries to intercept the father, leading to a violent scuffle punctuated by shrill cries. Worried for his mother, the boy hurries downstairs, only to witness the horrific sight of his father strangling her. As she struggles for air, she desperately urges her son to flee. Soon, she breathes her last. The father casts her body aside and turns a malevolent gaze toward the boy, who panics and runs upstairs to hide in a storage trunk. After the father searches the upper floor and finds nothing, he departs in a hurry. Hearing him leave, the boy's fear begins to subside. But as he cautiously lifts the trunk's lid, he is met with the furious face of his father, staring back at him with a messy beard and enraged eyes. The boy begs for his life but is mercilessly dragged out to the freshly dug hole. He pleads uninterruptedly, unable to process why his once kind father has descended into madness and now seeks to kill his own family. The father ignores his son's cries, muttering about a blood debt that must be paid, and strikes him with a shovel. The boy collapses instantly. Just as the father is about to bury him alive, a gunshot rings out. The father is struck in the head and falls beside his son. The savior is none other than the boy's mother, who had miraculously survived. Fast forward 33 years. The boy, now a man named Charles Boone, has spent decades at sea to escape the nightmares of his childhood, rising to the rank of captain. He is currently aboard his ship, presiding over the funeral of his wife, who had been his companion for many years. Her final wish was for him to settle on land and provide a stable, bright future for their 3 young children. Following the service, he informs the children that their life of wandering is over and they will be settling down. His eldest daughter Honor and son accept the plan, but his youngest daughter, Loa, remains silent, clutching a necklace her mother had given her, her heart heavy with grief. After a long journey, they arrive in a small town in Maine, where a carriage pulls up to a stately old mansion. This is not Charles's home, but he is about to become its new master. He had recently received notice of a will from his late cousin, Stephen, summoning his family to inherit the ancestral house and an accompanying lumber mill. The opportunity perfectly aligned with his late wife's dying wish, so Charles brought his family. He did not realize, however, that this moment marked the beginning of a new nightmare. As the former caretaker hands over the keys, she earnestly cautions Charles to always keep the cellar door locked and not to attempt to uncover its secrets. Charles is puzzled by her warning. At that moment, a large flock of crows flies hastily over the house, casting an eerie pall over the scene, though the family pays it little mind. Inside the mansion's great hall, 5 portraits are displayed on the staircase. The children are curious, and Charles explains their lineage: his cousin Stephen, his uncle Philip, his grandmother in the center, and Stephen's daughter. He tells the children that Stephen's entire family has passed away, which is why they are now here. Then, they notice the final portrait, one of their father, has been defaced. It seems this is not the only part of the house that has been vandalized. Charles resolves to report the damage to the local police the next day. As a seasoned sea captain accustomed to storms, Charles dismisses the old caretaker's warning. Upon seeing the cellar, he opens the door without hesitation and descends. The dim, decrepit space has what appear to be fresh bloodstains on the floor, reminding him of the caretaker's words. It was said Stephen's daughter died here after an accidental fall down the stairs, a sight that supposedly led to Stephen's own death from grief. Charles pushes the thought aside and ventures further in, where he discovers a large bathtub fitted with shackles, seemingly for restraining someone. Suddenly, a strange noise comes from above. Charles lifts his oil lamp and, in the faint light, sees a horrifying sight. The crevices in the ceiling are teeming with squirming insects. In his shock, a few fall onto his face. Startled, he quickly leaves the cellar. Exiting into the kitchen, Charles finds his children sitting down for a meal. He sternly warns them that no one is to enter the cellar. Later that night, while soaking in a bathtub, Charles is enjoying a moment of peace when he is shocked to find worms emerging from the faucet and infesting the water. Nightmares of his father choking his mother flash through his mind, and the harrowing memories cause him immense psychological pain. Just as quickly, the water in the tub returns to normal. The strange occurrences in the old house deeply unsettle him. The following morning, his son Tane is playing in the backyard when he stumbles upon 3 gravestones. He recognizes the names as belonging to Stephen's family. His startled cries bring his sisters and Charles to the spot. Charles is stunned to find his cousin's family buried there, which makes no sense to him. To prevent the children from panicking, he reassures them, suggesting it was perhaps a sentimental gesture from Stephen's family, showing their attachment to the house. Not far from the mansion is the town center, bustling with life. Charles drives the children to town, intending to both report the vandalism and let them experience their new community. However, the reception is not what he hoped for. After they exit the carriage, the townspeople stare, point fingers, and mutter curses under their breath. Charles comforts his children and encourages them to explore while he goes to the constable's office. At the office, the assistant calls for Constable Dennison, her husband. Dennison recognizes Charles immediately. After hearing about the vandalism, Dennison seems indifferent and instead speaks of Charles's family's reputation in the town. He explains that Stephen's family was considered strange and, despite their wealth, had a poor relationship with the locals. Dennison ultimately advises Charles to sell the house and mill and leave the troubled area. A confused but resolute Charles makes it clear he intends to stay and put down roots. Seeing his determination, Dennison simply wishes him luck. Elsewhere, as the three children are about to rejoin their father, the son notices a small animal. As he bends to inspect it, he looks up to see a strange, barefoot girl approaching. The girl appears to be suffering from an illness. Her pale complexion and somber tone frighten the boy. Just then, Charles arrives and pulls his son away. The girl's parents, hearing the commotion, see Charles's family and angrily take their daughter back inside. Back at the mansion, Charles says goodbye to the former caretaker, who had come to do some final cleaning. Soon after, a woman named Rebecca approaches the house. She has come to inquire about the position of governess, mentioning her education at a women's college and assuring Charles she can handle the children's education. Charles, who had been worried about this very issue, is impressed and readily agrees to hire her. Needing a housekeeper as well, he offers her double the usual salary to take on both roles. After Rebecca leaves, Charles discusses the decision with his children. A show of hands confirms their approval, and he feels relieved that their education is settled. Loa remains quiet, still mourning her mother, but Charles reassures her that things will improve. He is determined to fulfill his wife's wish and build a future for them. While Charles contemplates this, the walls of the house begin to creak and groan, a daily occurrence since their arrival that fills him with an ominous feeling. The next day, Charles finds the workers at the lumber mill on strike. He calmly walks into the yard and asks for the foreman. Portly, swaggering man approaches, clearly the ringleader. Recognizing the man's defiance, Charles pulls out a coin and explains it is severance pay. He gives them a choice: take the money and leave, or produce 600 feet of lumber that day and every day after. Drawing on his experience as a captain, he lays out his terms. His words stun the workers. He then announces his plan to expand the mill and divide profits into 100 shares, with the workers and foreman each getting 30% and himself 30%. The more they produce, the more they earn. After hearing this, the workers exchange uncertain glances. Seeing he has made an impact, Charles turns to leave. The bookkeeper hurries to stop him, asking about his share. Charles explains he will receive the remaining percentage, with bonuses for good performance. The pleased bookkeeper then informs Charles about outstanding invoices near a place called Jerusalem's Lot. Charles recalls that this is where his grandfather began the family fortune and decides to investigate personally when he has time. Meanwhile, Rebecca has bonded with the three children. She teaches them about Halloween and how to make props for the holiday. To create a festive mood, she plays a seance game with them. Holding a candle, she sets a serious atmosphere. Suddenly, a gust of wind from outside blows out the candle. Rebecca calmly walks to the window, muttering about whether a spirit has truly arrived. As she goes to close it, an owl crashes into the glass and falls dead. The unsettled group then notices the cellar door has mysteriously opened, and a wailing sound emanates from within. Rebecca quickly reassures everyone it is just a game, but as she looks into the dark cellar, her heart fills with dread. She quickly relocks the door and returns to her room, where she furiously writes in a journal. It is revealed that Rebecca is a writer. Her purpose in coming to the Boone family was deliberate. Upon their arrival, she saw the mysterious family as the perfect subject for a story. She decided to embed herself with them to uncover their secrets. Before she came, her mother had strongly warned her against it, mentioning a strange illness in town rumored to be linked to the Boones, and that a quarantine notice had even been posted on the mansion. Undeterred, Rebecca had insisted, telling her mother it was her legacy, as her father had once been the Boone family's lawyer. The following Sunday, Charles takes Rebecca's advice and brings the family to church services to help them integrate. However, as they are about to enter, the pastor's wife, Alice, stops them, stating that her father owns the church and they need his consent. Charles approaches Alice's father, who venomously furiously tells the Boone family to leave, calling them a curse on the town. Furious, Charles warns the old man to stop his tirade or face the consequences. He then leaves with his children, with Loa visibly upset. Charles has to forcibly lead her away. After the disheartening incident, Rebecca apologizes to Charles, explaining that the town's hatred is rooted in the bizarre history of his ancestors. Charles doesn't blame her. He goes to Loa and apologizes for his aggressive behavior at the church. Loa says she doesn't blame him, but then hugs him and, for the first time in a long while, speaks up. She asks if he is hiding something from them, adding that it scares her. Charles is stunned, realizing the secrets he holds may soon come to light. In the town tavern, the mill foreman proclaims that the strange disease is Charles's fault and that they must drive his family out. Spurred on by the crowd, the father of the ailing girl grabs a lighter and leaves. That night, he prepares kerosene, gets in his carriage under the cover of darkness, and speeds toward the Boone home, intending to burn it down. Halfway there, a man holding a hammer and a bucket blocks his path. Before the arsonist can get a good look, the man attacks him, slits his throat, douses him in kerosene, and sets him ablaze. Charles is shaving when he suddenly feels something in his nose. He touches it, and a disgusting bug falls out. Alarmed, he checks his reflection. He feels a squirming sensation inside his nose again and instinctively tries to dig it out. After much effort, he manages to remove another bug. Strangely, the sensation intensifies. Losing control, Charles grabs his razor and slashes his own nose. The intense pain snaps him back to reality. He realizes the sensation is gone, his nose is unharmed, and the sink is clean. It was all a hallucination. An unsettling morning doesn't deter Charles. He visits the town pastor's home and sees a family portrait that includes a set of twins. When the pastor comes to the door, he informs Charles that his children tragically passed away and the photo is a memento. Charles offers his condolences and asks about a girl in the back of the photo. The pastor explains she was Stephen's daughter. After the pastor's own children died from a mysterious illness, his wife Alice directed her grief and resentment toward the Boone family, which explains her father's hostility. After discussing family matters, Charles asks the pastor if he can give a business presentation in town, proposing a shipyard to invest in the community and create jobs. The pastor agrees it is a good idea and allows Charles to speak at the afternoon's Thanksgiving service. Charles expresses his gratitude and apologizes for any trouble his family has caused. The pastor, expressionless, states that none of it had anything to do with the Boones. That afternoon, the pastor leads Charles into the Thanksgiving service. His appearance causes a stir, but with the pastor's persuasion, the crowd allows him to speak. Charles delivers a passionate speech, advocating that building a shipyard would bring economic prosperity. Alice's father immediately objects, accusing Charles of trying to drain the town's resources for his own gain. Charles counters that the old man is being stubborn and urges everyone to let go of their prejudices against his family, stating that past events have nothing to do with him. He declares he will be recruiting workers at the local tavern in 3 days, inviting anyone who shares his vision to join him. On his way back, Charles's horse suddenly stops, wary of something ahead. He sees a mysterious woman in tattered clothes standing in the road. Charles asks if she needs help, but she says nothing, takes a bite of an apple and steps aside. As the carriage passes, the woman stands behind him and softly says, "The worm is calling." Charles, not understanding her words, leaves in confusion. Elsewhere in town, a pregnant woman is in labor. After enduring excruciating pain, a baby's cry is finally heard. The midwife joyfully lifts the newborn, but her smile vanishes. Sensing something is wrong, the mother asks to see her child. The midwife reluctantly hands the baby over. With one glance, the woman bursts into horrified tears. The newborn is deformed, lacking eyes, a mouth, and limbs. It is a moment of utter despair. The scene shifts to Alice, walking with her pastor husband. She tells him that an unmarried woman just gave birth to a monster, and while no one knows who the father is, she assumes he must be a scoundrel. The pastor listens without expression, his heart in turmoil. Alice has no idea that her husband has been unfaithful. The woman in labor, named Pringle, is the pastor's mistress, and the deformed child is his. That evening, the pastor secretly visits Pringle at the inn, locks the door, and embraces her. She weeps, saying it is God's punishment. The pastor disagrees. Holding the deformed baby, he smiles and calls it a blessing from heaven, telling Pringle they will soon leave the town and its strife behind. Meanwhile, Rebecca finds a public school for the children. On the first day, as Loa returns to her seat from the blackboard, a boy trips her, causing her mother's seashell necklace to scatter across the floor. The teacher intervenes, preventing the incident from escalating. Loa goes home clutching the broken pieces and falls asleep. The next day, she discovers the necklace is missing. 3 days later, Charles holds his recruitment event at the tavern. He is focused on growing his business but has misjudged the townspeople's mindset. Many people watch and mock, but not a single person applies for a job. Defeated, Charles returns home and begins drinking. As he is lost in his troubles, Rebecca and the children enter, armed with Halloween props, eager to go out and have fun. Charles happily agrees. While they are out, Pringle is at the inn trying to calm her child when she sees the mysterious woman from the road downstairs, staring up at her. It is clear this woman has her sights on both Charles and Pringle. Rebecca takes Charles and the children into town for Halloween festivities. Unexpectedly, a deranged woman bursts onto the street, the mother of the ill girl. Turns out her daughter has just died. Overcome with grief, she sees Charles and curses him, claiming his cousin Stephen was responsible for her daughter's death. Charles tries to calm her, but Constable Dennison fires a warning shot, controlling the situation and ending the night's events. Back at the mansion, the more Charles thinks about the unfounded accusations, the angrier he becomes. He recalls the woman's words that his cousin caused her daughter's illness, which is impossible, as Stephen died before the girl was even born. In a drunken frustration, Charles goes to Stephen's grave, determined to exhume the body and confront his cousin's memory for the undeserved reputation plaguing him and his children. Horrifyingly, when Charles digs up the grave, he is shocked to find that the coffin is empty. Following this discovery, Charles begins to suspect a conspiracy is tied to his inheritance. He revisits Stephen's will and letters, finding hints of a deliberate plan. He then goes to the former caretaker's residence to question her. The caretaker reveals she was the one who found Stephen's daughter dead in the cellar and Stephen hanging nearby. A few days later, Stephen's father, Philip, overwhelmed by grief, drowned himself at sea. The 3 bodies were displayed in the mansion's living room, drawing many onlookers who showed no respect due to the family's reputation. The caretaker says she hastily buried them herself. After hearing this, Charles tells her that Stephen's body is not in the coffin and demands to know the truth. The caretaker's expression becomes tense with fear, and she insists she cannot say what really happened. Charles now understands that something is deeply wrong. He boldly speculates that Stephen's family might not have perished after all. If they are alive, what could their objective be? When he returns home, Charles discusses these possibilities with the governess, Rebecca. However, she is adamant, telling him she had personally seen the bodies after Stephen's supposed death and is certain they are deceased. At that moment, a window shatters. Peering outside, they see a mob causing a disturbance. Charles retrieves his gun and goes out to confront them. The troublemakers, seeing the firearm, hesitate. Suddenly, Charles is ambushed from behind by the foreman, whose voice he recognizes. Overmatched by the man's size, Charles is unable to defend himself. Just in time, his eldest daughter appears with a gun, driving off the attackers and resolving the immediate crisis. As the crowd disperses, one of them is left behind. On this ominous night, it seems a grim fate awaits him. As expected, a dark figure approaches and ends the man's life. This raises a perplexing question. Why would a killer eliminate someone who is threatening Charles? And for what purpose is blood being collected in a bucket? The mysteries deepen, suggesting a far more complex reality than what appears on the surface. Staring at a photograph of Stephen's family, Rebecca finds the Boone family saga increasingly fascinating, convinced that the story she is writing will be truly terrifying. Due to the previous night's assault, Charles has sustained several injuries. As Rebecca tends to his wounds, Charles notices a medicine bottle that had belonged to Stephen. The bottle bears an address and a doctor's name. When questioned, Rebecca explains it is for a facility on a small, nearby island. Determined to find answers about Stephen, the secrets he kept, and why the townspeople hold such animosity towards him, Charles decides to visit. The island is home to an insane asylum, a place no one dares to live near. To find the truth, Charles has to venture into this forbidding location. He soon locates the doctor, who inquires about the reason for his visit. Charles claims he is searching for his cousin, Stephen. The doctor replies with grim irony, suggesting he should be looking in a grave, not here. Charles admits that he has, in fact, exhumed the grave, only to find it empty. Surprised, the doctor asks why he would do such a thing. Charles explains that he is being framed for something and wanted to prove Stephen was truly dead. The empty grave, however, leads him to suspect that Stephen might be alive, luring him to this town to subject him to torment. After hearing Charles's account, the doctor seems to understand. He informs Charles that he is displaying classic signs of persecutory delusions, a hereditary affliction within the Boone family. Pointing to the medicine bottle, the doctor explains it is for treating mania and that he had treated the entire Boone line. Charles is incredulous. As he observes the asylum overcomes patience, he begins to question his own sanity. The doctor asks if he has been seeing worms, explaining it is a hallmark of his family's condition, which he terms vermophobia, an extreme, hallucinatory fear of worms. Charles's father and Stephen's family were driven mad by these visions, believing a mythical book held the cure, but the doctor assures him no such book exists. There is no cure for their illness. At this revelation, Charles is overwhelmed. Recalling his own experiences with worms, he realizes it is all part of the inherited madness. The doctor urges him to check in for treatment while he is still lucid, for his own sake and for his family. Feeling his sanity collapsing, Charles flees the asylum. Dragging his weary body back to the old house, he is met by his son, who frantically tells him that the apple he was eating had suddenly become infested with worms. Charles desperately asks if he is sure, and his son confirms it. Gripped by despair, Charles understands the family curse has now reached his own children. He walks heavily up the stairs, nearly stumbling as he passes the portraits of his grandmother and Stephen's family. In his room, Charles begins drinking heavily. The strange noises from the wall start again. Already in a dark state of mind, he is consumed by a violent rage, wanting to destroy the source of the sound. He seizes an axe and begins swinging it wildly at the wall. Hearing the commotion, his 3 children rush to the room in terror. The out-of-control Charles nearly strikes his daughter, Loa. The close call sobers him, and he is horrified by his own actions. Deciding to follow the doctor's advice, Charles goes down to the mysterious cellar to use a cold water bath to calm himself. It is then he finally understands the purpose of the shackles on the bathtub. They are for emotional control therapy. Like his ancestors, he has inherited the cursed worm mania. To restrain himself, he submerges himself in the tub. The bone-chilling water makes him shiver, but what is more terrifying is the sight of familiar words carved into the tub. Blood calls blood. The scene flashes back to the Boone family mansion in 1781. An elegant lady, flanked by her 2 sons, sipped her tea. Suddenly, she felt a horrid sensation in her mouth and, to her horror, pulled out a disgusting worm. She stared at the writhing creature until her mother's voice snapped her back to reality, and the illusion vanished. This woman was Charles's grandmother. 69 years later, back in the present, Charles finally understands the fatal history of the Boone family, a madness that leads to frenzy and mania. Gazing at his young son, he is engulfed in despair. Meanwhile, the pastor's mistress, Pringle, is hanging clothes when she senses she is not alone. She turns to see a mysterious woman standing nearby. Panicked, Pringle draws a dagger, but the woman takes it from her and plunges it into her own thigh, declaring that she cannot escape her master's control. Watching the woman depart, Pringle knows she has to flee. She sends a message to the pastor, who meets her at their secret cabin. Pringle warns him that it is coming and begs him to take her and their child away. The pastor, though confused, promises to get her to safety in a few days. Returning home, the pastor finds that his wife, Alice, has gone to the graveyard where their stillborn twins were buried. Overwhelmed with guilt, he cannot bring himself to confess his plan to leave with Pringle. Alice laments that anything planted on the graves will wither and rot. Heartbroken and helpless, the pastor kisses her forehead and leaves. Elsewhere, Charles awakes to find Rebecca, who decides it is time for a serious conversation. She expresses her fear that he might harm the children. Charles quietly recounts the nightmares of his childhood. An indelible horror he feels is making him more like his mad father every day. After what the doctor has confirmed, he has no doubts. He tells Rebecca that for the family's safety, he will commit himself to the asylum. Rebecca is speechless and deeply upset. Just then, his eldest daughter bursts in, announcing they have found something in the barn. They rush out and discover an underground tunnel. Charles instructs everyone to prepare while he investigates. He crawls through the gloomy passageway to a staircase at the other end. Ascending with an oil lamp, he enters a dilapidated room where "Blood calls blood" is written on the wall. Decomposing animal remains and bones litter the floor, indicating recent activity. The room has several exits, but one wall is shared with the old house. He realizes Rebecca is just on the other side. After emerging, Charles urges Rebecca to return to town to fetch the lumberyard's bookkeeper and Constable Dennison for backup. He now knows it is all a fraud and is determined to expose Stephen. The bookkeeper arrives quickly. Charles, cleaning his gun, details his discovery in the tunnel and his conviction that Stephen is still alive. He intends to draw him out tonight. The bookkeeper is tasked with protecting the children while Charles goes into the tunnel alone to lie in ambush. As night falls, Charles is startled awake from a nightmare. He gets to his feet and begins to search for any sign of Stephen, and soon hears a noise coming from the living room above. At that moment, Stephen sits at the top of the stairs, where Loa sees him. He calmly approaches her, asking if she likes her necklace, a shell necklace she thought she had lost, which he had secretly returned. Seeing her guard lower, he tells her he can not only cure her lameness, but also reunite her with her deceased mother. Just as Loa is about to be swayed, Charles appears, ordering Stephen to stay away from his daughter. Loa, however, tells her father not to shoot. Stephen reveals his vampiric fangs and prepares to escape through the window, but not before telling Charles he must find the book that can cure their disease. Enraged, Charles fires, hitting Stephen with what should be a fatal blow. Stephen falls from the second floor but, unnaturally, rises and flees into the darkness. Meanwhile, Rebecca rushes to Constable Dennison's house. Upon entering, she is met with a shocking scene. Dennison's wife is dying in a chair. A figure bursts out from behind her, and Rebecca gives chase, cornering the person in a dead end. When he turns, she recognizes the pale, vampiric face of Charles's uncle, Philip. Just then, Dennison arrives on his patrol. Rebecca tells him Philip is alive and has just attacked his wife. Dennison hurries home and finds his wife weak and dazed, with a distinct mark on her neck. Back at Charles's home, as everyone discusses the events, a group led by the mysterious woman, a servant of the being named Jacob, appears outside. Charles stands guard with his gun as the woman challenges him, saying that if he wants to know the secrets of the worm and the Boone family, he should come to Jerusalem's lot. She then sacrifices a young girl in a bloody spectacle that chills Charles to the bone. As the deranged group departs, Charles is left at a loss. The scene shifts to a memory of Dennison's. As a young man in 1781, he had witnessed 3 people hanging from a tree. A woman refused his help, and despite the pleas of 2 children, she kicked the stool out from under them. The young man rushed forward and cut the ropes, saving the 2 children, who were Philip and Charles's father. The woman, however, resisted and died. The children, horrified, forgot about a book lying on the ground. Snapping back to the present, Dennison, prompted by Rebecca's report, arrives at the now empty Boone house. A pool of blood on the floor indicates something terrible has happened. Charles now understands this was a planned conspiracy. He only hopes his children are safe, but Loa has clearly been entranced by something otherworldly. To unravel the mystery, he decides to go to Jerusalem's lot, entrusting the children to Rebecca and taking the bookkeeper with him. In the town church, the pastor finally confesses his affair to his wife, Alice. When she asks if he loves his mistress, he remains silent and leaves, leaving her heartbroken. The pastor goes to Pringle, telling her he cannot leave yet. He feels a duty to the townspeople and wants to complete their baptisms. Pringle argues he is unworthy, speaking of an ancient, bloodthirsty immortal named Jacob, a being older than God who commands many followers. She shows him a bite mark on her thigh, proof that she too had been his servant before escaping. The pastor, still skeptical, tells her he has already bought tickets for their departure. After returning home, Dennison calls a doctor, who confirms his wife's wound is not human but animal-like. To uncover the truth, Dennison locks his wife in a room for her protection and hides in the shadows with a gun. That night, he is awakened and goes to her room, where he finds her sucking blood from Philip's wrist. Philip declares that Dennison's wife now belongs to him and lunges at the constable, biting him. On the verge of being overpowered, Dennison grabs a cross and drives it into Philip's neck. The holy object burns him and Philip flees. Dennison looks at his wife, her mouth stained with blood, with immense sorrow. Charles and the bookkeeper arrive at Jerusalem's lot, a once prosperous mining town founded by his grandfather, now in ruins. Charles sends the bookkeeper back to protect the family and proceeds alone. He finds the residents pale and drained. Soon, he meets the mysterious woman, who guides him to a dimly lit room. There, a sinister figure sits before a bound and bloodied woman, with 2 buckets at her feet. The man is Jacob. He motions for Charles to sit. Charles demands to know who he is. Jacob explains he is a necromancer, or a vampire, leading a cult devoted to an ancient god known as the Worm. He tells Charles his grandfather had unearthed a dark book there, The Mysteries of the Worm, which could summon this ancient entity and plunge the world into darkness. His grandfather, ignorant of its true power, had sealed his family's fate by writing his name in it, cursing them all with the worm madness. This is why the townsfolk feared the Boones. Charles asks why he has been brought here. Jacob replies that he wants the book, but only a Boone can sense its location. Stephen and his father were meant to find it in exchange for eternal life, but once they became vampires, they lost the ability. Enraged, Jacob had wanted to kill them, but they pleaded, revealing the existence of Charles. Thus, Charles was lured there to find the book so Jacob can unleash the worm. Jacob promises that if Charles succeeds, he and his descendants will be freed from the curse. To prove his ruthlessness, Jacob has the bookkeeper brought in, threatening Charles that he will kill everyone unless Charles agrees to his terms. With no choice, Charles consents. Upon returning, Charles finds a body on the road. It is his daughter, Loa. He has done everything for his children, only for this to be the outcome.
Boone, means you harm.
Could he do any worse than this?
It appears this Jacob contacted father in regards to a book.
De vermis mysteries, mysteries of the worm.
My father's mad.
Is it your child?
It is.
Put aside everything you thought you...
Weeping, he carries Loa's body back to the house. The next day, he takes her out to sea, wanting to let her rest with her mother. He gently kisses his daughter before releasing her into the ocean. Back home, a guilt-ridden Rebecca confesses everything. After Charles had left for Jerusalem's lot, she had taken the children to her house in town. That night, Loa found Rebecca's manuscript about their family and, feeling betrayed, ran back to the old house alone, where Stephen was waiting. By the time Rebecca arrives, Loa is gone. Rebecca is deeply remorseful for her betrayal and for failing to protect Loa. That evening, Charles tells her she can leave the next day for her own safety. That night, everyone gathers together. Charles explains that Loa's death is a warning from Stephen, whom he believes will return. Just then, the door creaks open and Loa appears, miraculously resurrected. She calls to her father and leads him to the barn. Now completely under Stephen's influence, she implores her father to embrace the worm illusions, find the book, and give it to them, not to Jacob. Charles now understands that giving the book to anyone will endanger his family. As he processes this, Stephen vanishes. Charles rushes after him but finds nothing. When he turns back, a multitude of worms is silently approaching. After his encounter with Philip, Dennison summons the pastor and the doctor. They track down a former Boone family caretaker who confesses that Stephen and his kind are vampires and that the town's plague is the result of them draining people's blood. Dennison also learns from his wife that consuming a vampire's blood can grant resurrection and immortality. She now sees Philip as her god. Believing his wife has lost her humanity, Dennison smothers her with a pillow as she sleeps. He then picks up a gun to end his own life, but just as he is about to pull the trigger, his wife resurrects behind him. Meanwhile, the pastor meets Pringle at the church and gives her a train ticket. He now believes her stories about Jacob and is determined to protect the town by eliminating the vampire Stephen before joining her. Unable to dissuade him, Pringle leaves with her child. The pastor then returns home, only to find his father-in-law in a compromising situation, which leads to him being thrown out. He takes his bags and checks into Rebecca's guest house. Pringle and her child board a carriage leaving town. Midway, their journey is blocked by another carriage. Pringle has a bad feeling, but the coachman gets out to help and is swiftly killed. The mysterious woman, Jacob's servant, and her followers have ambushed them. Pringle considers escape, but she is swiftly cornered. She pleads with the mysterious woman, offering to accept any fate if her child is spared. The woman ignores her pleas, taking the infant before ending Pringle's life with a single, quick movement.
Read the book, or I will bleed the truth.
Meanwhile, Charles, following the guidance of the worms, arrives at a desolate location. His mind is flooded with information about them, urging him to surrender to his fear to feel their presence. Unsure if he is experiencing an illusion or reality, Charles begins to dig frantically with a shovel. He soon unearths a coffin swarming with worms and realizes he is at the grave of the pastor's daughter, next to the church. Shaken back to the present, Charles kneels and forces the coffin open. Among the white bones, he finds the Book of Worm Mysteries. As he stands and opens the tome, a powerful force surges through him, triggering a terrifying vision. He sees a blood-red sun looming over a landscape littered with corpses. Jacob walks slowly across the field of bones, while rivers and seas run red with blood in a scene of pure apocalypse. Horrified, Charles drops the cursed book. In the distance, he hears his daughter Loa's cries. He retrieves the book and rushes to her side. Loa demands he hand it over, but after having just witnessed the apocalyptic future it promises, Charles knows the book will bring ruin to humanity. He refuses his daughter. The vampire Stephen attempts to persuade him, but Charles's resolve holds firm. Because they are on the holy ground of the church, Stephen can only watch in helpless anger as Charles takes the book and quickly departs. At the same time, on Jerusalem's lot, a sky full of crows serves as an ominous signal to Jacob that Charles has found the book and has likely seen the future. Certain that Charles will not surrender the tome, Jacob urgently summons his followers, knowing he must go to the town immediately to retrieve it. Charles stumbles back to the family estate, where his children are relieved to see him. After comforting them, he explains everything to Rebecca and urges her not to leave. He is certain Jacob will come for the book this very night, and that Stephen will not give up so easily. In town, fearful residents watch as a carriage arrives carrying Pringle's body. The pastor, hearing the news, rushes to untie the ropes, but his desperate calls to Pringle go unanswered. He turns to the crowd and sees only the indifferent faces of the townspeople. Devastated, the pastor gets out of the carriage and condemns condemns their cold-heartedness. His father-in-law seizes the opportunity to mock and whip him, telling him to leave. A fight ensues, and the foreman begins beating the pastor until Constable Dennison arrives to rescue him and disperse the crowd. Back at the old family house, everyone prepares for a siege. Rebecca, engrossed in her work, is startled when Charles enters carrying a hammer. Clutching the book to his chest, he claims to hear strange voices. Alarmed by his behavior, Rebecca tries to convince her daughter to return to town, explaining that her father is not acting normally. For safety, Rebecca goes to the barn to check on the horses, only to find Charles has set them free. When she confronts him, he declares that no one is allowed to leave, leaving Rebecca frozen with shock. Later, she finds a shovel in a room and goes down to the cellar to find Charles, where she is horrified to see him preparing a noose. He tells Rebecca that the book has shown him the collapse of order and a new world ruled by vampires. He doesn't want his children to suffer a life of servitude and believes he is saving their souls, finally understanding why his own father made a similar choice. Faced with this terrifying logic, Rebecca feigns agreement before knocking him unconscious with the shovel. When Charles awakes, he is back to his normal self. After Rebecca explains what happened, he is horrified to realize he almost committed an unthinkable act under the book's bewitching influence. He asks where the book is, and Rebecca reveals she tied it to Dennison's vampiric wife, who is now bound in the cellar bathtub. Rebecca had called the bookkeeper and Dennison for help, and Dennison had brought his wife and the pastor. Charles explains the book's contents, warning them it must not fall into Jacob's hands, or humanity will face its end. He asks the men to stay, as a great battle is imminent. As night falls, the group remains on high alert. Philip arrives first with Stephen and Loa. The sight of crosses painted on the house deters them, so they shout from below, demanding the book. Suddenly, a grappling hook shoots down, impaling Philip and dragging him upstairs. In the ensuing chaos, Dennison is stabbed, while Charles manages to pin Philip to the wall. Philip's terrified screams are silenced by an axe blow that decapitates him. Below, Stephen waits anxiously until his father's severed head rolls to a stop at his feet, signaling his demise. Before Stephen can fully process his father's death, he sees Jacob's forces arriving. After shouting a few harsh words, he flees in a panic. Facing the dense ranks of the vampire army, Charles knows the battle will be incredibly difficult. Drawing on his experience at sea, he assigns everyone their roles. Dennison is to guard the second-floor window to prevent access to the barn and the secret passage, while others defend the doors and windows on the first floor. He encourages them, saying they can triumph if they stand their ground. Dennison asks the pastor to lead a prayer, but the pastor, his faith already shattered, begins to doubt God. Seeing his struggle, Rebecca leads the prayer herself, steadying everyone's nerves. As the vast vampire army approaches, Rebecca comforts the pastor, telling him that everyone understands his feelings. The pastor confesses that he feels the power of the vampires but has never witnessed a miracle from God. He now believes God does not exist and calls himself a fraud who deceived his family and the town. Rebecca grows deeply concerned for his mental state. Before going upstairs, Dennison goes to the cellar to tell his vampiric wife he has avenged her. She is indifferent, claiming that the pursuit of immortality is humanity's true purpose and that there is no heaven. She tempts Dennison to drink her blood and join her. Seeing his wife so completely lost, Dennison feels a profound sense of pain and helplessness. Meanwhile, Jacob stands at the entrance of the house, his mere presence causing everyone inside to feel immense fear. When Jacob departs, the battle officially begins. His human servants, unafraid of crosses, are the first to attack, tasked with breaching the doors. At that moment, the pastor is approached by the cult woman outside a window. She seduces him with words, claiming Pringle was merely a prostitute and not worth dying for. She offers him a way out if he hands over the book. The pastor, thinking of his child, asks what she has done with the infant. The woman reveals a shocking truth. Pringle never told him the child was not his, but the vampire Lord Jacob's. This final blow completely breaks the pastor. He goes to Dennison's wife, intending to take the book and surrender, but Charles arrives just in time to talk him down, temporarily stabilizing him. Dennison, guarding the secret passage, eventually fails, and the vampires begin to infiltrate the house. The young boy is discovered alone but is saved at the last moment by his sister, Loa, who, despite being a vampire, has not lost her humanity. With the passage breached, vampires swarm in, forcing the defenders to retreat. At the last door, Charles instructs everyone to fall back to the cellar, managing to close it just in time for their final stand. As vampires batter the door, the scent of death hangs in the air. Rebecca leads the children in prayer while the pastor and Dennison fight on. Charles points his gun at his children, unwilling to see them become tormented undead. Just as he is about to fire, the attack from outside stops. The vampire army has inexplicably retreated. As everyone stands confused, the son confesses that he gave the book to Loa to save them. A quick check confirms the book is gone. Charles rushes outside to see his daughter leaving with Jacob. All their efforts have been for nothing. Frustration and helplessness bring the captain to tears. Jacob returns to his lair and begins the summoning ritual. He first intends to turn his human servants into vampires so they can act during the day. After the ritual, the world will be plunged into eternal darkness. The servants drink blood and go to the woods to end their lives, awaiting their vampiric rebirth. Just before the summoning, Loa asks what will happen to her family. Jacob replies that all humans will become little more than livestock. Hearing this, Loa feels a seed of rebellion grow within her. Back in town, Charles leads the people, accompanied by Dennison's wife. Some curse him, but when Dennison reveals his wife's vampiric form, the crowd is horrified to see a familiar face so terribly transformed. She wails as she jumps from the carriage, and the sunlight purifies her, causing her to combust into ash. The horrifying scene confirms that vampires are real. Charles seizes the moment, revealing that vampires were the true cause of the town's suffering. He implores them to join him in reclaiming the book from Jerusalem's lot before the world loses its light forever. The crowd disperses, leaving Dennison kneeling by his wife's charred remains, swearing vengeance on Jacob. Alice finds the pastor and pleads with him to return to their family. He, however, is lost in shame. Alice comforts him, holding no grudge, and persuades him to come home. They share a meal, mending the rifts between them. Suddenly, the pastor feels unwell and collapses. Alice turns him over and asks if he ever loved her, then reveals that she has poisoned him. Not long after, Charles arrives to find a desolate scene. The pastor is dead, and Alice has taken her own life. He then sees Alice's father on the stairs, who cries that Alice was all he had before taking his own life with a gun. Despite the tragedy, most of the town's men gather at the tavern to join Charles. They plan their strategy while the women and children take refuge in the church. As they mount their horses, Charles senses the summoning ritual is about to begin. They race towards Jerusalem's lot, where dark clouds are swallowing the sun. At the vampire lair, Jacob is opening the ancient book to begin the ritual. He tells his followers that once the book is read, a blood sun will rise and eternal darkness will reign. Charles and his men arrive just as the sun is extinguished, witnessing stars across the cosmos being pulled into the darkness as planets begin to crumble. Knowing there is still time before the blood sun appears, Charles orders everyone to light their torches and prepare to fight. The battle is brutal, and the humans are driven back into the woods. Dennison is gravely injured. He and Charles take cover and make their way to the lair, where they see vampires guarding the door. Dennison, having lost his will to live, gives Charles a cross and asks him to kill Jacob to avenge him. He then charges forward, creating a diversion with his final screams. Charles rushes into the lair and shouts for Jacob to stop. Unwilling to halt the ritual, Jacob orders Loa to kill her father. Reluctantly, Loa advances with a dagger. Charles, trying to awaken her memories, refuses to harm her. Loa stabs, but she strikes the cult woman sneaking up behind Charles, proving her humanity remains. Charles attacks Jacob, who easily subdues him with one hand. As Jacob bites into Charles's neck, a dark figure snatches the book. Startled, Jacob is caught off guard, allowing Charles to plunge Dennison's cross into his neck. The ancient vampire stumbles back and is impaled on an iron spike, finally meeting his end. Charles tells Loa to hide as he pursues the one who took the book, recognizing the shadow as his cousin Stephen. Stephen stands in the darkness, reciting the final chapter to complete the ritual himself. Charles arrives and knocks the book from his hands, engaging him in a fierce fight. Though outmatched, Charles finds a stone and, with a surge of strength, pins Stephen down and beats him mercilessly before ending his life with a wooden stake. Above, the dark sun still looms. Someone picks up the book and simply closes it. As the book shuts, the darkness gradually begins to dissipate. On the battlefield, Rebecca smiles with relief. Charles lights a torch, burns down Jacob's lair, and leaves Jerusalem's lot with his daughter. He understands that as long as the book exists, darkness will always threaten to return. He makes a shocking decision, to become a vampire himself to guard the book and break the curse. He shares his plan with Rebecca. The time they spent fighting together has led to forgiveness and a budding affection between them. They share a brief, heartfelt embrace, but their relationship has to be put on hold. Following the plan, Charles drinks Loa's blood, then has his daughter mortally wound him. A doctor surgically implants the Book of Worms inside his abdomen,
Death certificate.
issues a death certificate, and the bookkeeper digs a grave to fake his death. The secret will be hidden, and the world will forget him. When Charles awakes, his appearance has completely changed. A new vampire is born. He sits up, looks at the scar on his chest where the book was sewn, and everything has progressed smoothly. Slowly descending the stairs, he shares his final wishes and instructs his 3 children to stick together and live well. The next day, he goes to the seaside with his family and Rebecca. After bidding them farewell, Charles walks toward the ocean. His son runs to him, asking how long his father will be gone. Charles replies that he will always be nearby, protecting them. He then pushes a boat into the water and rows away, disappearing into the distance as his family watches in profound sadness. And with that, the series ends. So guys, I hope you liked the video, and if you did, then what are you waiting for? Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Love you all.